What is up, fight nerds and dirty gamblers? I am Erik, and this is Erik Bets Fights. Welcome to episode 2 of Big Money Bets. It's a brand new show. Like I said, just the second episode. This is a show where we look at the upcoming UFC card, and I go over some of my favorite props and parlays, big money props and parlays. In this case, we're going to be looking at UFC 273, headlined by Alexander Volkanovski and Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie. Of course, that card goes down tomorrow already. We're only, 16, 18 hours away or something like that from the first fight. So, we are almost there. But yeah, before we jump into the bets for UFC 273, we're going to recap how the last episode went, which would have been the event headlined by Curtis Blaydes and Chris Daukaus. And to say the least, folks, it did not go particularly well. Our props and parlays for that event did not do well. But here's the good thing when we're looking at these big money bets, they don't have to do well. Obviously, these are unlikely bets, and that's why we get those big numbers on them. So you only have to hit one every once in a while to be ahead. So yeah, if we would have bet all of these, it would not have gone particularly well, but that's okay. We will put that in the rear view and look forward. But yeah, let's go ahead and go through the results from that last card, Blaydes versus Daukaus. So we start off with our two-leg parlay. My most confident two picks on the card were Manon Fiorot at minus 425 and Curtis Blaydes at minus 385. However, those numbers are so big that there just wasn't a good return on that. So what I decided to do is I did put Manon Fiorot at minus 425 in that two-legger, but then I wanted to put someone that I was confident in, but that had a better number than that minus 385. So we went with Neil Magny at minus 225. So the payoff on that was minus 128, Fiorot and Magny. So that one did hit. We did hit our two-legger, so we're looking good there. For the four-leg parlay, the two legs that we added on were Curtis Blaydes at minus 385 and Askar Askarov at minus 360. That's our womp, womp, womp right there. Yeah, not to get into this too much. You can watch my preview video for that event to hear me talk about it a little bit, but I wasn't super confident in Askar Askarov. But everybody else was, so I kind of jumped on the bandwagon and figured, yeah, we'll go ahead and throw him in there. But so the odds on that four-legger would have been plus 187, but Askarov didn't come through there, so our four-legger loses. And then for our six-leg parlay, we added on Alexa Grasso at minus 225 and David Dvorak at minus 120. There were bigger favorites I could have put in than Dvorak, but I was looking to, add some value to the parlay, get that number up a little bit by putting somebody in there that was fairly close to even money. And then obviously Dvorak didn't come through either, but that six-legger would have been plus 661 if that would have happened for us. So it didn't go great, but the thing is, when the way that you want to think about this, like if you're going to bet that two-legger, that four-legger, and that six-legger, like let's say, for example, you've got $20 total that you're going to put on those three. You're going to want to put like half of that on the two-legger and then maybe like $6 on the four-legger and $4 on the six-legger, something like that. So you want to put like half of it on that top one, because we're going to try to get close to even money on that two-leg parlay, as close as we can, so that, you're going to spread the money out in such a way that as long as that top one hits, then you're kind of covered on the rest of them. So if we would have done that properly, we would have been close to coming out even there anyway. And then the other thing we like to look at on this Big Money Bets show is take a look at some highly improbable, I call them, some highly improbable prop bets, just some prop bets that I like. The lines here are all from Bet Online. I think the lines that I use for the parlays are all from William Hill. Those are the two books that I use, and Bet Online is the one that has the props that I use, so I'll be using prop lines from there. But so the props that we threw out there for Blaydes versus Daukaus, McMahon Hossa to end in a draw, which was at plus 6,600. Obviously, you're not going to hit that draw very often. Something like 1% of fights end in a draw. I can't remember. I was just looking at this in Fightnomics, but it's like 1% or less, I think, of fights end in a draw. But, the read I had on McMahon Hossa to have some potential to end in a draw was that I thought McMahon would come out and have success with her wrestling early, that she would probably win round one, probably win enough of round two to take round two, but then she would start to fade and Hossa would start to take over. And then I thought if she faded enough, maybe Hossa would 10-8 her in the third round and we could end up with a draw. We're actually going to come back to this a little bit, this same read a little bit later in the show, but obviously that didn't happen. The nice thing is I didn't give this out on this show, but I did talk about it on my full card breakdown, I think. But I actually did bet McMahon to win by decision, which was plus 400. I only put a quarter of a unit on that to win 1 unit, but that did come through, so that was cool. Another one I mentioned was Tululan by KO, which my book didn't even have a line for it, so I have no idea what it was at. Obviously, that didn't happen either. Tululan did better than people thought he was going to do. A lot of people thought that he was just going to get run right over by Khizriev like within the first minute or two, and that didn't happen. Tululan looked okay for a while until he didn't anymore. But next up, this is kind of a weird one, admittedly, especially in hindsight, but I had Curtis Blades to win by submission in round 3, which we could get at plus 2,800. Yeah, obviously that didn't come anywhere near happening because K1 Curtis Blades came out, or Golden Gloves Curtis Blades. He came out and wanted to show off his striking game. Didn't even attempt a single takedown. So, my read there was obviously Curtis Blades. He usually goes to decision, or if he finds a finish, it's usually going to be a ground and pound stoppage. But I thought, we haven't really seen Chris Daukaus's gas tank, and I thought like, okay, if Curtis Blades is able to get takedowns and keep Daukaus down for long periods of time, we might see Daukaus get super tired and really fade and really just not have much ability to do anything on his back. And we might see him, roll over and give his back or something like that because he's exhausted, and maybe Blades would lock in the choke. Obviously, that did not happen. And then finally, I recommended Chris Gutierrez in round 3, which was plus 1,600. Kind of what I was thinking there. I definitely wasn't expecting Gutierrez to do what he did and get that big, crazy spinning back fist. I guess it ended up being more a spinning back forearm that actually caught Song Yudong and got the knockout. But I thought maybe Gutierrez would be able to soften him up with leg kicks and maybe even find that leg kick stoppage late in the fight, or drop him with leg kicks and maybe be able to finish up with strikes or something like that. But so Chris Gutierrez did get the finish, but he did it much earlier than the round 3, which would have cashed that prop for us. Anyway, enough about that. We didn't do great for the first episode, but let's go ahead and move on to our big money bets for UFC 273. I actually made some fancy graphics we can look at here. So our 2-leg parlay for UFC 273, we're looking at Khamzat Chimaev minus 550 and Vince Pichel at minus 115. That might seem a little crazy, but here's the thing with this card. Obviously, we've got those 3 huge favorites right up at the top. We've got Alexander Volkanovski minus 750, Khamzat Chimaev minus 550, and Peter Yan at minus 470. You could parlay all of them together. I mean, if you had done it a couple of weeks ago, you might have gotten an acceptable payout, but doing it at those numbers, I mean, just parlaying those big of favorites together, you just don't get a return on it. So, if I was going to pick, kind of like how I said with the last event, if I was just going to pick my 2 most confident plays here, it would probably be Khamzat and Alexander Volkanovski. But if you parlay a 750 and a minus 750 and a minus 550, you're just not going to get anything on it. So we are getting risky right off the bat here and going with almost an even money pick in Vince Pichel. So if we parlay these 2 together, we get total odds of plus 121. So again, like I said, if you did decide to tail these, and I'm not saying that you necessarily should, I always want to give my disclaimer here too, that I am not a professional gambler. I am not any kind of gambling expert. I'm just a guy who likes to bet on fights and likes to talk about betting on fights. So, I'm not recommending that you tail these bets. I'm just putting them out there. But if you do tail, you do so at your own risk. But yeah, if we do Khamzat and Vince Pichel, we get that plus 121. You're going to want to put, if you do tail, you're going to want to put like half of the bankroll that you're going to use on these. Like if you're going to bet $20 on the 3 of them or whatever, maybe put like 10 of it here, because you actually get a little bit of plus money on it there. So it'll cover the rest of it if you do, if you were to hit this one and not hit the others. All right, let's go on to our 4-leg parlay. Does it work if I just click this? Oh, it does. All right. I've really only run StreamYard once before. I've only done 1 live stream, so I'm kind of just figuring out what I'm doing here. And I was trying to figure out how I know how many live viewers I have, and I just saw it. I currently have 0, which is sort of what I was expecting doing it at this time. But it's also kind of what I wanted, because to be honest with you, the reason I don't do live streams is because I'm really nervous about doing live streams, because I don't like that I can't edit and control the outcome if something goes wrong. But I figure if I do it late, I can get my feet wet a little bit without a bunch of viewers, or without any viewers even. So anyway, so then our 4-leg parlay, we're sitting there with Khamzat and Vince, and then we would tack on Alexander Volkanovski at minus 750, Peter Yan at minus 475, which is going to give us total odds of plus 203. So again, if you were dropping your $10 or whatever it might be on that top one, maybe for this 4-legger, maybe you do like, $6 or $7 or something like that. And then finally, we got to look at our 6-legger. For our 6-leg parlay, we're sitting with Hamzat, Vince, Volkanovski, Peter Yan. Oh, Daz Files popped in. How's it going, Daz? At least from my TV. Awesome. Good to see you, Daz. Thanks for popping in, man. And then we would add on Ian Gary at minus 400 and Tisha Torres at minus 105. I did want to go with another close to even money pick just to bump us up a little bit here. So it is a little risky with Pichel and Torres in there since they're close to even money. I mean, every fight's risky, but when we're looking at odds like that, we're almost looking at a coin flip there. But those are two fighters that are close to a coin flip that I do favor to win. And we end up with plus 640 on this one. So if we hit that, that would be kind of nice. And I actually did simply because there are so many big favorites on this card and that parlaying them together just doesn't do a whole lot for you. I decided to put together a bonus one here as well. We're calling this the risky parlay simply because all of the fighters in this parlay are close to even money. So, it's unlikely to hit, but that's represented in the fact that it's plus 1433. But if we do Vince Pichel at minus 115, Tisha Torres at minus 105, Alexei Oleinik at plus 100, and Kay Hansen at plus 110. And these lines are from William Hill, by the way. I did just check them right before I came on here, so hopefully they should still be accurate or pretty close to that. But yeah, and if that whole thing hit, we'd be sitting at plus 1433. All right, with that, folks, let's go ahead and talk about the props that I like. Highly improbable, the big money props. Obviously, there's wimpier small money props that we can do here, but this show's called Big Money Bets for a reason, gang. We're looking at the big money props. I'm going to start with the lowest payout and then go up to the biggest payout. So one that I was looking at here is Darian Weeks by decision, which you can get at plus 650. Is Ian Gary probably going to win this fight? Sure. Yes, he is. And that's represented in the line, of course. But, Ian Gary is still only 24 years old. He's still, reasonably green. He's very talented, but he's, just recently stepped up to the UFC. He's still got a lot to prove. Darian Weeks isn't a super, super high level opponent, but I think Darian Weeks is, potentially being undersold a little bit here. I think he does have pretty solid skills. He's not a high level UFC fighter, but I think he's pretty solid. I think he's got solid skills. And I think if Ian Gary isn't able to find an early finish here, this fight could start to play out closely. I think we could see Darian Weeks potentially having some success with his wrestling. So Darian Weeks by decision at plus 650. I think you could do worse than that. Yeah, 4 viewers. We're up to 4 viewers. Thanks for being here, y'all. I do appreciate it. Make sure to leave me a like, leave me a comment, all that sort of thing. I really appreciate those of you who are here watching. Next prop bet that we're looking at, Chan Sung Jung by submission at plus 1,800. Again, Volkanovski is minus 750 here. Obviously, Volkanovski is the likely winner, but we do know that Chan Sung Jung is a potent finisher. He's one of those guys who can find a finish in the blink of an eye with strikes or with submissions. So basically, I'm thinking what I'm looking at here is the possibility that Chan Sung Jung could land a big shot and hurt Volkanovski. I mean, Volkanovski has a decent chin, but we have seen him hurt in the past. And Chan Sung Jung is, the bigger guy. He's going to have a big reach. Potentially he could find Volkanovski with a big punch and drop him for a club and sub situation, and then jump on and grab a guillotine, jump on and grab a rear naked choke. And if Chan Sung Jung were to hit that sub, we'd be looking at plus 1,800. Oh, and like I said, these prop lines that I'm using are from Bet Online, simply because that's the book that I have access to for props. But the prop numbers on Bet Online are not that good compared to some other books. So I think Bet365 and some other places, you're probably going to find even better numbers than these. So I'm just giving out the numbers that I have on my book. Next prop, Aljamain Sterling in round 1 by submission, plus 2,000. And again, we're looking at an underdog here. Aljo is not terribly likely to win this fight, but I think you can argue that the line might be a little bit wide. depending upon how you feel the first fight played out, I guess, I thought Aljo was doing pretty well early in the fight, and he did pretty well in round one. He did pretty well in round two, largely because he was pouring on the pace and the pressure and looking to make Jan uncomfortable. I know a lot of people said that they thought that was a bad game plan from Aljo. My feeling on it is that I think it was a kind of a solid game plan, really, because the only reason Aljo found any success in that fight at all is because he was pouring on that pace and that pressure. Obviously, he's not going to keep that up over 5 rounds, but I think Aljo's best bet to win against Peter Yan is to overwhelm him and catch him with something early, because we know the way Jan fights, he's got that computer thing going on. He's a robot who's just kind of taking it easy early. He's making his reads. He's downloading his information about you. And then when the time is right, he flips that switch and he comes alive and he makes it happen. So if we were to see Aljo win here, look what he did to Corey Sandhagen. Aljo is great at taking the back. He's a great backpack specialist. So I think if Aljo were to win here, it would potentially be a situation like that, possibly even a club and sub, like I said with the last one. So plus 2,000, Aljo in round one by submission. Is he going to win? Is it likely? No. But if he were to, I think that's potentially a way that it could happen. Next up, and this is one where there's a little bit more of a clear path to this making sense, I think. Vince Pichel in round 3 by submission at plus 3,000. So kind of the read that I have on this fight, and I think it's the same read that a lot of people have, is that Mark Madsen is likely going to have success with his wrestling early, kind of like the way I broke down the McMahon-Hossa fight. Madsen he's a fantastic wrestler, obviously Olympic level wrestler. I think a silver medalist in the Olympics. He's probably going to have success with his wrestling early. Vince Pichel is not particularly hard to take down, but he's pretty hard to keep down. So how the way we could see this play out is Madsen is probably going to get takedowns, but he's probably not going to be able to keep Pichel down for long periods of time. We may see Pichel popping back up again, in which case we may see Madsen having to shoot and take him down again. Obviously, that's what really tires wrestlers out, is when their opponent is getting up and they got to work for that takedown again, and they get up and work for that takedown again. If we see Madsen having to repeatedly work for takedowns throughout round 1 and throughout round 2, we could see him tiring out. And Pichel's one of those guys who comes more alive as the fight goes on. We see Pichel sometimes do his best work in round 3. He can kind of start sort of slow and then get more aggressive as the fight goes on. So we potentially find ourselves in round 3. Madsen is pretty tired out because he's been shooting a lot of takedowns and working hard to get Vince Pichel to the ground and trying to keep him there. Pichel's starting to come around. I mean, Pichel's not a guy who's known for getting submissions, but he is a BJJ black belt. And look at the situation we saw with Fluffy Hernandez over Rodolfo Vieira, right? When somebody is tired, you can submit anybody when they're tired, right? So Vince Pichel in round 3 by sub, we can get at plus 3,000. Next highly improbable prop we're looking at, it's another plus 3,000. Aspen Ladd in round 3 by KO at plus 3,000. I do like Raquel Pennington to win this fight, probably by decision. But if Aspen Ladd were to win, I think the way it's probably going to happen is going to be with takedowns and dominant top control and with ground and pound. So kind of the same read we were talking about with the last fight. We could potentially see Aspen Ladd being able to control Raquel throughout the fight, see Raquel slowing down. We could see Aspen Ladd find a dominant top control position in round 3 and just be kind of pounding away and to a ref stoppage. And if that were to happen, we'd be sitting at plus 3,000. And like I said, we're counting our way up and up and up to the bigger numbers. We are now to the final prop, the big one. Madsen Pichel ends in a draw at plus 6,600. Always got to get a draw bet in there, right? And yeah, it's literally the breakdown that I just kind of already gave, is that, we could see Madsen winning round 1 10-9, winning round 2 10-9, and then tiring out. So I mentioned the possibility that Madsen's going to tire out and Pichel could finish him in the 3rd round. Another possibility is that Madsen is tired out and Pichel has a dominant 3rd round but doesn't find the finish and gets a 10-8. So we go 10-9 Madsen, and then another 10-9 Madsen, and then 10-8 Pichel, and we would end up with a draw at 6,600. And I know somebody on Twitter said they had it on their book. I don't know which book it was, but as high as like plus 8,000. So you can get an even better number than that plus 6,600. But And just to be clear, I don't personally bet all of these props that I'm giving out. They're kind of just things that I like to look at. Just kind of fun ideas to throw out there if you feel like taking a sprinkle. The ones that I actually did bet myself this time, I put a tiny sprinkle on Vince Pichel in round 3 by sub, and I did put a tiny sprinkle on the Madsen Pichel ends in a draw. So those are the 2 that I did bet. Now, one other thing that I want to look at real quick before we get out of here, and we didn't do this last time, but I just wanted to briefly talk about what I think are potentially the best live betting spots on UFC 273. So if you do live betting, I mean, obviously there are certain things, and I'm not a super practiced and experienced live better myself, but it's something that I've been trying to learn more about, and just trying to pay more attention to those live lines and what kinds of things to look for. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. So one thing that I like as a potential live bet spot is the Oleinik versus Vanderaa fight. And what I'd be looking for there is Vanderaa obviously has shown pretty good cardio, especially for a really big guy who maybe doesn't look like he's in the best shape. And Oleinik is a guy, he's 44, 45 years old. He is a guy who can slow down as the fight progresses, especially if we see round 1 playing out with, I mean, Vanderaa doesn't have very good takedown defense, but he's a big guy. He's going to be a tough body to move around. And obviously Oleinik isn't the kind of guy who's explosive, shooting single and double leg takedowns and that kind of thing. He's the kind of guy who, he's usually going to close the distance by throwing big overhands. He's going to try to hold you against the fence, and he's going to look for clinch takedowns, body lock takedowns, trip takedowns, that kind of thing. So if we see Oleinik holding Vanderaa against the fence, working hard in the clinch, working hard to take him down, especially if we see Vanderaa get up again, we might see Oleinik use a lot of energy from that 44, 45-year-old body in round 1. So if we see this fight get out of round 1 and it looks like Oleinik is slowing down quite a bit, we might be able to get a good line on Vanderaa, because I think that the fight probably does favor Vanderaa as it goes longer, as he has shown pretty good durability and pretty good cardio. So there's one spot to watch as a potential live betting spot. Another one is Pichel versus Madsen, which we've already talked about quite a bit. And I already talked about the reasons on that too. If we see Madsen, because one of the things that you want to look at for a live betting spot is a fighter who's going to have a really strong round 1 and then is potentially going to fall off as the fight goes on, because that really strong round 1 is going to give you a better line on the other fighter who then could potentially take over later. So it's especially if a fighter who tends to be really dominant early and then tends to fade, and they're fighting someone who tends to be a slow starter and then tends to get better as the fight goes on, which is exactly what we're looking at with Madsen Pichel. So I think you wait for round 1 to play partially out, and then see what kind of line you're getting on Pichel, especially if Madsen is having a really dominant first round. You might get a great line on Pichel moving into round 2 or even moving into round 3. Another live betting spot I like is Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns. And the way I see this one is, if you bet Burns right now, pre-flop, you already get Burns at plus 425, maybe even plus 450 in spots. So it's already a pretty good line. But we know that Khamzat Chimaev is an absolute bat out of hell in round 1. And he's probably, will he potentially change up his approach a little bit now that he's stepped up quite a bit in competition? Maybe, but probably not a whole lot. He's an aggressive fighter who looks to get his opponent out of there in round 1. And I think it's reasonable to expect him to do that here against Gilbert Burns. And it's also reasonable to expect that he might get Gilbert Burns out of there in round 1. But if he doesn't, I think we're going to get a really good line on Gilbert Burns moving into round 2. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that Burns is the likely winner of the fight if we get out of round 1. I'm just saying, I think right now the line on Burns is plus 450 or whatever. If Khamzat comes out and 10-8s Gilbert Burns in round 1, absolutely has a dominant round 1, we might get we might get plus 1,000 on Burns moving into round 2. So that's a spot that I would keep an eye on. And it's one of those things that you'd probably just sprinkle a little bit and hope it goes your way. But yeah, if I can get a crazy line like that live on Gilbert Burns, as long as he's not too hurt and not too exhausted after that first round, I would potentially take it. Hey, Narco Cop popped in. How's it going, Narco? Good to see you. And finally, the last spot I potentially like as a live betting spot here is Aljamain Sterling versus Petr Yan. And again, this is for reasons that I kind of already talked about a little bit too. In the first fight, we saw Aljo have his best success by pouring on the pace and pressure early. he may look to change up that game plan here. Although, like I said, I would argue that the pace and the pressure was the only reason he really had any success in the first fight, and it's probably his best chance at success again. But we'll see. But I think obviously the line on Jan right now is like minus 470, which I would say isn't really bettable. Some people might disagree, but I wouldn't bet Jan at that line personally. And so I don't think you're probably going to see this line change a whole lot live. But if Aljo does come out and have a really good round one, and then he even has a really good round two, we may see the line get a little bit better on Jan. I mean, I don't think it's going to flip to even or anything like that, but if it's at minus 470, even if it like cuts that in half or something, we may see, because as the fight goes on, even if Sterling looks good early, let's say Sterling wins the first 2 rounds, we know the way Jan fights is he tends to come on stronger as the fight goes on. So this is one of those spots where even if Sterling has some success early, it's reasonable to expect that Jan is going to take over late. So, we may get a better number than that minus 470 if it does play out like that. All right, folks. Yeah, we went almost a half hour. I wasn't planning on going that long, but that's all I got for you, gang. This was the second episode of Big Money Bets, Props, and Parlays to line your pockets for UFC 273. I appreciate Daz and Narco for popping in. I appreciate you guys being here. It's great to see you. For any people watching later, I appreciate you watching my video. Make sure to leave me a like down there. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please make sure to do that. And also, if you can leave me a comment, that's great. It doesn't matter what it is. Tell me I hated your video and I disagreed with everything you said. That's fine. It gets the algorithms going just as much as a positive comment does. So again, I am Erik with Erik Bets Fights. Please find me on Twitter at Erik Bets Fights, on Instagram at Erik_Bets_Fights, and of course, right here on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, reminding you to play it smart, play it tight, and let's grow those bankrolls, everybody. Enjoy UFC 273, and we'll see you next time.